Patrick, and today I think I've got a very exciting lesson for you. We're going to be looking at part 2 of the speaking test, and I'm going to be looking at how I would answer the questions, and let's get into it. Before we start, maybe I could take a minute and introduce myself. My name is Patrick O'Grady, and I've been teaching English for a long time. I taught in Korea for 3 years, I taught in Saudi for 5 years, and I've been teaching English in Hanoi for 10 years. English Hanoi is the name of a company that my wife and I started, and this is where we focused on English for communication, English for work. We teach mostly adults, and we focus there on listening, speaking, pronunciation, we've been working with IELTS for a while now, and that's why we're here. So maybe you don't know what IELTS is. Let me tell you a little bit about it. IELTS is the International English Language Testing System, and the IELTS test tests you on 4 different criteria: listening, reading, writing, and speaking. And as I said earlier, today we're going to be focusing on listening, we'll be focusing on speaking, part 2. So let's go on. Let's take a look at what is this, what's part 2 all about. The first thing I want to tell you about is that in part 2 you will be given a question, and it'll have a couple of different criteria. You'll be given a pencil and paper, and you'll be given 1 minute to make some notes. This minute is really important. It's very important that you make some notes and do something, that you organize your ideas. Because honestly, even for me, speaking for 2 minutes is a really long time. So you've taken a minute to organize yourself, to write a few ideas down, and the next step is the speaking part. You'll be given 2 minutes to speak. I recommend that you speak as long as you can, and try not to cut it short at all. When you're practicing at home, it's a really good idea to time yourself. Everyone's got a phone with a timer on it, and it's super important to time yourself out. And if you can do that, it would really help. Not only timing yourself, but also recording your answer and listening to it afterwards is a huge, huge help. You might, I'm sure you will be, very surprised at a lot of the silly mistakes you make when you're speaking, and it's super important to record and listen to your answer. So, you're given 2 minutes to talk, and again, if you can practice with that listening, it's great. I also wanted to talk about what you will be graded on, and what makes your score. You're graded on 4 different things. The first is fluency and coherence. That means, are you able to organize your ideas correctly? Do you make sense? Is there a fluency? Is there kind of a natural speed at which you go? Or are there a lot of pauses? I think that's really going to hurt your score, all right? So we don't want those pauses, and it's fluency is just, can you speak in a relaxed manner, and in a logical way? So that's one criteria you're marked on. The second criteria you will be marked on is your lexical resources. And the first lexical resource is on vocabulary. And we've been working a lot on vocabulary here, and it's always good to throw in some extra words. You might have seen my video, I don't like, that's one way of adding extra vocabulary, and it's going to help your score go up. Other words you're going to want to replace are good and bad, like. These are very simple, low-level words. They're perfectly acceptable in the real world, but in a test we want to show our language ability as best we can, and the simple words just aren't enough. Fluency and Coherence, Lexical Resources Vocabulary. And the third one is really weird because it's also called Lexical Resources. So the 2 and 3 are both called the same thing. This 2 is Lexical Resources with vocabulary, and 3 are Lexical Resources with grammar. Okay? And basically, you want to show compound and complex sentences to get yourself a higher score. Simple sentences will get you a 4.0, maybe a 5.0. And again, those simple sentences are perfectly acceptable out in the real world, but they're not going to help you in the test. So that's something that we'll be working on here at IELTS Hanoi. Fluency and Coherence, Lexical Resources, vocabulary, Lexical Resources, grammar, and finally, pronunciation. Pronunciation is the fourth thing you'll be graded on. And if you want to improve your pronunciation, the single most important thing for Vietnamese is to focus on your final sounds, okay? It's not going to make your pronunciation perfect. However, when I meet a Vietnamese person and they say, "Nai to me you," "Nai to me you," should be "nice to meet you," all right? If you watch those final pronunciation, final sounds, the foreigners will have a much easier time understanding you. And more importantly, the examiner will have a much easier time understanding you, and you're going to see your band go up and up, okay? So, those are the 4 criteria that you will be tested on by the examiner. So, part 2 of the listening test. Let's take a look at it, and let's break it down and how you can how you can do a little bit better. What I'd like to do is show you a sheet of paper with the question on it. Now, in the test, the examiner will just give you a sheet of paper and the pen, well, this is a pen, but a pencil, and you'll be given 1 minute. Let's just kind of go through the steps and look at how we can do it. It's going to be more than a minute, but that's okay. So, here we go. I hope I've got my computer right here, so I'm going to take a minute and, oh, that's not right. I'm going to take a minute and get us up so I can see some of your comments. That's not it. Just give me a minute here, and I'll try not to make too many mistakes in that while we're recording this. La la la, just a minute. Come on, man. Okay, here we are. Cool. So we've got, here's the question. Describe a journey you made in the past. Uh-oh, hang on. I think I don't have it here. That's listening tips. Dang, it's difficult getting all this stuff organized, guys. Tell you what. Where the heck is the video? All right, let's not worry about it. Describe a journey you made in the past that you remember well. You should say what forms of transport you used and why, who you traveled with, what was good and bad about it, and explain why you remember the trip so well. All right. So the examiner hands this over to you. You've got 1 minute to think about this. The first thing I would do is take a close look at this question, and I would underline the key ideas that the question is asking you. You don't want to miss any important points. So I'm going to ask you now, what would you underline when you're looking at this? What do you think is a key element to underline? Let's see here. Describe a journey you made in the past. Okay. you remember well. You should say the forms of transport you use, who traveled with, what was good and bad about it, and explain why you remember the trip so well. So if this is what I would have underlined, okay? You can see it here. All of this is important. I want to talk, I'm underlining the word journey because I'm thinking this is a good word we're going to want to replace. This is a good vocabulary word we want to change. In the past, okay, so not in the future, okay. Remember that for our grammar. We don't want to be using future tense. Remember, forms of transport, okay, so let's list through that. Who? Travel with, okay. Good and bad. This is a good place we should be replacing some of these vocabulary words that make us sound a little smarter. And explain why you remember. Why you remember. Okay. So, I've been given the sheet of paper. I've underlined the key points. So, journey, journey, journey. What are some vocabulary words we might use for journey? Okay, expedition, adventure. All right, forms of transport. Taxi, bus, airplane, and car. Who did I travel with? Fam. Good and bad. Oh yeah, whoops, good and bad. Excellent. Lousy. Why you remember it. Oh, what did I say there? Fam. Meet. Daughter. Lose. Drive. License. Okay. Nature. Hikes. Okay. So, guessing that's about a minute. I don't have a clock here, so I don't know. I might have spent a little extra time, but these are the notes that I've made here. Journey. So I've underlined this, and I've got, I hope you can read it. It says expedition and adventure. Okay. So these are some vocab words we might include. Forms of transport. We've got taxi, bus, airport, and car. All right. Who do I travel with? I've written down here fam. And I didn't write family because we want to keep everything short. This is just a quick reminder for me to help my conversation along. What was good? Okay, we got excellent, bad, lousy. Some more vocabulary words just so I can remember. And what did I write here? What was good about it? Femme met daughter. Lost my driver's license. Okay. And the last thing I've written down is nature hikes. Okay. And it kind of goes back to journey with travel, maybe a little bit more vocabulary words for you. Okay. Where are we? So, you've been given a minute, and you've got you've had some time to think about this. Before we go on, I'd like to give you a little bit of vocabulary, a couple of extra words that you might use. Two of the things we underlined were good and bad. All right, good and bad. So let's come up with some vocabulary words. If you can, it would be awesome to come up with maybe 2 vocabulary words. Can you write them down below? 2 vocabulary words for good and bad. Good and bad. Because those are such simple words, man. You got to be able to come up with better vocab than that. All right? Well, I've written a couple of words down for you, and let's see what you got here. Excellent. Oh, I should have had you pronounce it first. Excellent. Excellent. What's that final T? Can you say it? Excellent. All right. Excellent. Good. And the second word for good is superb. Superb. All right. What's that final B? Superb. Can you say it? All right. Here we go. Superb. Superb. Now, as you remember, with good and bad, did you write any vocabulary words down below for bad? Come on, man. We can't take all day. You got to write something here. Okay, that's enough time. We're going to keep rolling. I've got 2 words for you. The first one, it's a bit informal, but I like it a lot. Lousy. Can you say it? Lousy. Okay. Here we go. Lousy. And so, again, that's terrible. It's really not good. And the second word I've got for you is quite formal. I like it a lot, too. When it's just a complete disaster, you might say, the food was atrocious, or traveling was atrocious. Okay? Atrocious. Atrocious. Okay? So those are a couple of good vocabulary words for good and bad. Again, good and bad is very low-level words, so we want to bump it up as best we can. Let's keep rolling. I want to give you a couple more vocabulary words, and I really want to go focus on journey. Journey. So let's go through this before we move on. I've got 5 different vocab words for journey. Do you think you can write it down below? Can you guess any of the words down below? And it's difficult talking here. I tell you what, it's my tongue doesn't want to work right sometimes. All right. I've got 5 different vocab words for journey, and let's go through it. Our first one is adventure. Adventure. All right, can you say it? Adventure. My family and I had a wild adventure in Canada. All right. The second word we have for today is expedition. Expedition. And we can say that as well. It was a long expedition getting over to Canada. Expedition. Expedition. Can you say it? Expedition. All right. While we were in Canada, we got to take a hike. A hike. So I would think of a hike as kind of a nature walk. You're going out having fun with the family. Hike. There you go. Hike. Again, another word for journey, traveling, moving. The journey I'm talking about is quite large. It's quite long from here to Canada. However, you might talk about a very short journey, how you hike from your home to school. And I remember this journey because A, B, and C. So, another word that's good instead of hike is trek. 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 Can you watch that K? Trek. Now, I think of trekking as being out in the wilderness and walking along, but trekking in general is it's a long walk. You might say that you trek across Hanoi. You might say it, but I think it might be more appropriate to think about trekking in the wild or maybe in a mountainous area. You'll see this word in advertising for travelers here in Hanoi. This is this trek and trekking. If you want to go for a walk out in the woods, talk to that company. Trek. Finally, the word for travel, journey, is travel. Travel. So these are 5 different words. Let's unfold everything here and go over them once again. Adventure, expedition, hike, trek, and travel. Okay. I would use these words more for a long, big adventure, a Bilbo Baggins type thing, and expedition as well for just a long journey. And I think I'll be using that today when I give you my sample answer. What do we got? We got vocabulary. I think it's time to give you the sample answer. So, before I go on, I just want to say that when you make your notes for part 2, these notes are not going to be given to the examiner. So, you really want to make very short, brief ideas that are going to help you remember. You don't want to make complete sentences. Making complete sentences are not important. The examiner is not going to be looking at them. That said, you can also make some short forms, all right? And you don't need to make proper words. And fam, I know that's a good short form for me to know. Family, okay, it's good enough. And also, when you're making your talk in part 2, you will be allowed to have this sheet of paper in front of you and your notes to help you go through this. Okay, so I've been given a minute to make some notes. I've made them, and I've thought about some vocabulary. I've written some things down, and now let's try to give a good answer here. I'd like to talk about an expedition that I made in the past. It was about 2 years ago. I took on a number of different transportation modes. We traveled from Hanoi to the Hanoi Bai airport by taxi. Well, when we were there, we flew in a jet over to Korea. While we were in Korea, we got on a bus and were shuffled around the airport there. Finally, actually not quite finally, we took a jet from Korea to Canada in Toronto, where my parents picked us up, and we went home in their car. I traveled with my family. My family includes a couple of different people, my wife, my son, and my daughter. There were a couple of excellent things about the trip. Probably my favorite thing was the opportunity for my father and mother to meet my daughter for the first time. She had been born over here, and it was very heartwarming and special for them to meet. I think something that was really lousy about my trip was the fact that I had been away from Canada for so long, I lost the right to have a driver's license, and they started me back at 0 level, which really frustrated me, and I wasn't able to drive around Canada, and it really made it a kind of a terrible trip. Probably the most memorable thing about the trip was the opportunity to go on nature hikes with my whole family, my parents and my family here. It's a bit disappointing in Hanoi. I don't get to get out into nature very often. So nature hikes were quite special. So that was my trip. Stop. Again, I don't have a clock here, but I'm going to guess that was about 2 minutes. My answer gave a number of complex sentences. It included, paraphrasing and changing around some key vocabulary words. We don't want to be using good and bad. Lousy and excellent and superb are much stronger words for us to use. So that's the presentation I've got for you guys today. If you liked what you saw, thank you very much. Maybe you could give us a thumbs up, and even better, if you could share this with your friends and family. I think what we're doing here with IELTS Hanoi is quite valuable, and I think it could really help you and your friends. So share it out. It doesn't cost a penny. Also, if you like what you saw and you're interested in taking an IELTS course, we have a couple of courses available now, not least of which are starting very soon. They're starting in the afternoon as well as in the evenings. Also, we've got a couple of pronunciation courses coming up in the very near future. If you find that when you're speaking English and a foreigner goes, "What did you say?" Maybe you're having some problems with your pronunciation. We have a nice short course that can really help you out and really focuses on the most important points for Vietnamese, and I think it's excellent. What else can I tell you? I guess that's all I got for you guys. Thank you very much, and have a great day. Bye-bye.